Man, sales is tough. I'm just not cut out to be a salesperson. Have you ever felt that way? Selling doesn't need to be so difficult. My name is Harry Spate. I'm here to serve and to help you succeed. Join me as we discuss sales made easy. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm very excited. All of those who are listening to this podcast about sales made easy. The whole theme is to help individuals, entrepreneurs, and some complicated salespeople to make life easier for yourselves. So today I have a real professional, someone that's been in sales for almost as long as me. The only reason he hasn't been is because I think he's a little bit younger. His name is Tim Kubiak. So Tim, welcome to the show. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about you and what you do?
Sure. So thanks for having me, Harry. And I will say my first sales job, I was hawking dinosaur candy on the school bus in about the sixth grade. I'd buy them two for a quarter and sell them for a quarter a piece. So,
Oh, you entrepreneur, you. I love it. It's like a Gary Vee story.
so legitimately, I did it to buy batteries for my handheld video game back then because they weren't rechargeable. So that's how my sales career truly started.
Nice. And so I'm pretty sure it was a simple approach, right? It wasn't overcomplicated. You probably didn't have to report a lot in the CRM.
Nope.
So tell us a little bit about what's happened since then.
So the truth is I've spent my entire career, the last 30 years, building companies, my own and other people's as well. I've had global roles where I've operated in, 5 different theaters and had staff in all of them, matrix organizations. I'm currently CEO of Zeppel Productions Inc., which is, founded and going through a bit of an evolution, and they do third-party data center maintenance. My background is really technology, and it's funny you joke about CRM because one of the things that I think has been lost is the actual act of selling has become a metric instead of a conversation about customers.
Oh man, you're speaking my language. So we'll definitely get into that a little bit because I think the quality of salespeople, people have lost their jobs, producers, because they didn't use a CRM.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure there's a solution around that, including hiring someone in the administrative department that helps sales reps who are producers that are just not good with or conforming to the CRM. So, well, while we're there, well, let's talk about that. So what's your thought on it?
So look, I had ACT on my desk when I first got into tech sales, 27, 30 years ago, right?
Yeah.
But it wasn't a mandate. I used it as the next generation Rolodex. And so one of the things, and I fight it, frankly, in my own business today, is where does automation play a role, right? And where does the buying journey, which has definitely changed, play a role versus live contact? And I've heard statistics probably a month ago that said, 80 to 95% of somebody's decision is made before they even engage a sales organization, which means there's a lot more on that front end.
Mm-hmm.
So, pure metrics, pure numbers, yes, you have to have the context. My business partner says that sales is a contact sport and it's all about having the right conversations. But numbers for numbers' sake, they don't make sense. I ran a cold email campaign, which was something new for me, right? And I knew people, I targeted people in industries I was familiar with companies I knew were emerging. And it was interesting that I got more out of 2 days at a conference than I did a 6-week campaign.
Wow. So how so? That sounds like a nice return.
It was a nice return, but the truth is it was real conversation. So it wasn't me taking other client situations and extrapolating it into, what I thought other people might resonate with. It was, hey, what's going on in your business? Where are your sales challenges? Okay, you're growing 20% and you're unhappy. Why?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah. Great. Yeah, so it's funny because I was around when CRMs were just becoming popular. And I did have ACT, and the company I worked for didn't even have anything, right? They were still using index cards in shoe boxes. And They were doing very well, and I said I want to be a technology guy because I knew better, and that's another huge long story, and I won't go there. But the technology guy Harry Spate, I jest, and so I started using Act, and then I went from that to another company, and then before long, CRM became mandatory, and salespeople who had never used it before were being judged on data that they were putting in, which at the time was all BS. So, interestingly enough, they were doing CRM contests, and guess who are the winners?
The people who put the most data in and sold the least.
Exactly, right? It was all about people who are great with data, right? Typing. And the salespeople are like, the hell with this. I need to earn a living, right? So they could care less about the contest. And so, the smart people, those of us who were in sales and crushing it and providing for our families, we were constantly being persecuted like witches in Salem. So, yeah, what's your thought?
I agree. And I think it actually caused a fundamental change in sales management too. If you look, now you have people that I can pull the dashboard and I know that Harry and Tim didn't make their 100 calls yesterday. Yeah, but
Yeah.
maybe I booked $1 million and everybody else booked in the whole company. So, get off my back. But the
Yeah.
truth is sales management changed. And it's actually one of the things that I work on in my day-to-day business is, yes, you need the numbers. Yes, you need to talk to customers, but are you talking to the right customers? And frankly, what is the rest of the team doing to help advance the sale? Right? If your sales manager is only telling you make 20 more calls to hit your number, it doesn't mean you're really going to hit your number. It's going to hit a KPI for somebody, but doesn't move
Right.
the needle. And I'm still coin operated. I still work off margin. So
Yeah, I like it. So, why doesn't just hitting the numbers work?
because it's like shooting a gun randomly. And so I know that's a little bit politically incorrect, but if you just point a gun somewhere, it's going to hit something, but it's probably not what you want to. In sales is
Yeah,
much the same way, right? If
yeah,
you don't know what your customer is, and so often I see founders, they're building a product that's innovative, but they don't know, this maybe solving a problem people don't know they have, and they're not educating the customers in their words, right? Or they're
yeah.
building, and I had this conversation actually with a VC guy a couple of days ago. They're
VC. Help
Oh,
me
I'm
out. What's
sorry, venture
VC?
capitalist. So a person that
Okay,
invests in early stage companies in the technology space typically, and this one was in information
okay.
security.
Yeah,
And they were like the 1200th one to market. They did this little niche product. Now, doesn't
yeah,
mean you can't build a good business, but it also means you're probably not going to be a household name, right?
yeah,
And I'm like, okay, well, what are the customers saying? What gap are you filling that these other people haven't? And sometimes you just get a patent and you hope you get acquired, and that's cool,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
But you know, looking at so many companies are on a burn rate, right? Especially in the technology space. I'm looking to build this and get adoption up there. I don't care if I'm profitable. And to me, that's just such a foreign concept.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, what was the outcome of that?
It's interesting because you're not going to change. I tend to stay away from venture capitalists, right?
Yeah,
I'm not against outside money.
yeah.
Um, but I'm against losing control of the business you're trying to build,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah,
So, the outcome is if they're starting with an exit strategy in mind, then you've got to run against that. And if adoption and users is all that really matters, because the true scale will come when they're acquired and go into a much larger organization,
mm-hmm.
that's great. But most of those, if you look, you get maybe, 10 and 100 that hit, right?
Yeah, yeah.
One in 100 that are truly measurable. And, you know, my friend from Communicate Your Why, Ben Baker, is talking about, people aren't talking in customer terms. And I think he's dead on there. They're talking in terms of what they're trying to accomplish. And it's all me focused, not focused on what problem you solve. If you
Oh,
look at your
yeah,
your legacy and my legacy, in my case, somebody wanted to buy candy first, right? After that,
yeah.
somebody wanted to buy phone service that was cheaper, right?
Right.
And that's kind of the history of how now are you a cost or are you a profit center, and what are you solving for?
Right. That's great. So one of the things that we were chatting about earlier, is about the idea of entrepreneurs actually selling for themselves. So you obviously have a ton of experience in working with startups and entrepreneurs. What's the general sentiment that you see out there as far as entrepreneurs and selling?
So I think they come in two flavors. You have the practitioner that is not does not perceive themselves as a salesperson. So they have a technical aptitude, they have a market insight, they understand a niche, whether they're a house painter or a roofer or whatever, and they build their business around those practical places. And then you have entrepreneurs that are truly sales driven. And I don't want to say the product or solution is secondary, but in many cases it is. They might be selling the same thing as 1,000 other people, and not, you know, and they're just doing it and they execute better in the sales front. And it's interesting over time to watch the trajectory of that. Now, somewhere in the middle is the person who's building a solution, whether it's a product or a software product or a service, and they're walking both lines. Those are pretty rare, right? I've seen a
Mm-hmm.
handful of them, and I know, I've been fortunate enough to meet some that were pretty big names along the way. Um, and they keep doing it, so it gets in your blood, I think.
Yeah, well, that's true. I think it's like those types of people, no matter what they touch, seems to turn to gold, right?
It does. It
Yeah,
does.
I mean, I'm sure there's losses, but I mean, just the perception is just like, here we go again, right? But I mean, you look at a guy like Jeff Bezos. I mean, sure, granted, and Elon Musk, they have losses, right? But they're constantly, they're salespeople. They know how to sell themselves. They know how to talk to VC people, right? They know how to talk to banks. All of that is selling, isn't it?
It is, right? And that's the other part of it is sales just isn't to customers. Though I think if you're a founder, if you're an entrepreneur and you're not talking to customers, you're doing yourself a huge disservice. And by the way, you can do it with the sales hat on, you can do it with the founder hat on. And
Right.
I actually, and I know this is part of your approach, I don't actually sell anybody anything. I look for
Yeah.
a problem that I can solve or not. And if I can't solve it, I'm happy to get you to somebody that can if I know. And if I can't, I'm happy to say I can't and walk away.
Yeah.
Don't force the fit.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a
Bezos,
great approach. I'm sorry.
Bezos took a long view, right? If you look back at what he did with Amazon in the early days, he sold
Yeah.
used books.
Right. Yeah.
Never expected it.
Yeah. I mean, the used bookstore that's now selling pretty much everything. This is crazy.
I run parts of the businesses I work for off of Amazon services now, and that's the
Yeah.
most profitable part of their business.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because I read. I mean, I'm one of those people that just stumbles across things in life. And there's a lot of us. I think the term is generalists, where we don't have a plan for everything. We just try different things, and we say, "Hey, this is pretty fun," or sometimes things suck, and so we leave those. But we try different things, and we say, "This is pretty cool. I'm going to give this a go for a bit." So generalists are, we're all throughout society, right?
Mhm.
And so this book I read called Range compares uh, Tiger Woods to Federer, the tennis player.
Oh,
And Tiger Woods, from infancy, his dad knew that he was going to be a golfer, and he trained him to be a golfer. And Tiger bought into it at a very young age. Whereas Fedorov, the superstar tennis player, was not like that. He was trying all kinds of different things. Even though he was shown tennis, he didn't really grab hold of it. He wanted to play soccer, different things. And it wasn't until he was in his early teens that he says, you know what, I think I'm going to stick with tennis. And then, some people would say, you're too old, right? And yet he became a guy that was devoted to it. And, so there's different ways. And I'm just comparing that to someone who out there has an idea, and that idea may take them to different places where it wasn't even really perceived. And I'm pretty sure Jeff Bezos selling used books did not see running cloud computing for huge corporations, right? I mean, is that safe to say?
yeah, absolutely. And look, you can even say Google. What Google intended to be and where they found their value in the metadata and the search and the advertising, that was not their original plan, right? I mean, they
Right.
found a secondary product that made them into what they are, or alphabet, or whatever you want to call them, right? But all
Yeah.
other things came out of it wasn't what they originally intended to do. It was a byproduct, and they just found it more profitable. And to your point, I think a lot of the strongest things are the ones that have that broader approach, right? You're open to the possibility. Now,
Yeah, I find that interesting. Yeah, so continue. I don't mean to interrupt.
no, and I was saying, and that's different than just chasing every shiny object, by the way,
Yeah,
right? You're doing what you intend to do and do it really well, and you find something that's better along
yeah,
the way. Versus, I'm trying to do 20 things, and that's one of an entrepreneur's sins, so to speak, right?
yeah.
Is they if you're successful once or you have something that works well, you think you can work the same magic with everything you touch, and you're in a different place and a different mindset, and you have to be really, really careful not to spread yourself too thin.
Right. So there are two things that come to mind. One is the riches are in the niches expression,
Yep.
right? And then the chasing the shiny objects,
Yeah.
right? So how do people balance that out for those who are entrepreneurs? What's a good way of balancing that out, would you say?
I actually will give you an overly simple answer.
Okay.
Talk to customers and see what they're thinking. Talk to customers about what's going on in their business, right? And I'm
Yeah.
assuming a business to business environment,
Yeah,
business
yeah, yeah,
consumer,
me too.
little different, but yeah, if because if they're not thinking about it, maybe you don't need it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I was talking to an entrepreneur recently, and she is, somewhat of a fractional CFO,
Mhm.
and her mission was to work with women, and then, which is great. So it's helping women own businesses was the mission, right? Because she says there's really not enough of us who are doing just that. But then she got involved with a construction company, right?
Okay.
So what happened then is that word travels,
Yeah.
and before long, you're now an expert
Yeah.
in a vertical market, which is all pretty much the same. So dealing with construction companies, she's now being viewed, and now it's not necessarily real easy to leave to go back to focus on what her original niche was,
Yeah.
right? So is that pretty common, would you say, or
Yeah. I would say it's more common than not,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
It's a logical extension of what she was doing, and she found a market with an underserved need that she fit.
yeah. It's interesting, and I think too is that space is dominated by males,
Yeah.
right? And so a woman brings a whole different perception that you can see that as an outsider saying, "Hey, wait a minute, it's just." You have no perspective of what it is for a woman to view this. Maybe all the guys are like, let's just keep building, right? Let's just dominate the world. And someone comes in with a different perspective and says, well, why don't you make what you have stronger or something? I mean, I don't know, but it's just, different things that, being married, my wife has a different perception, obviously. So there's things that males and females provide without going into that. But I mean, I just find it interesting that the original thing was one idea, and then it evolves into something else. So there's nothing wrong with that, right? As long as it works for your business, there's nothing wrong with it, right?
No, I mean, the business I grew up in Pittsburgh, the guy, I grew up on the telephone side of things. He had a computer side of things too. He got into the business because he signed an additional line on an invoice. He never intended to sell the telephone stuff, right? And ultimately, 12 years later, the part of the business that got acquired was the telephony side
Yeah.
because everybody else was on the computer side. Happy accident, the way he stayed in that. The truth is he was the only guy with inventory, and there was a back order shortage, supply chain issue back in the
Yeah.
mid '90s. And he was sitting on $300,000 in inventory that was killing him, and he got to sell it off at a premium. And he's like, I guess we'll stay in this.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's great. Yeah, lucky. Lucky is always seems to be people that seem to be doing the right thing anyway, though, right?
It is, but
Frequently.
it's calculated risk, right? If
Yeah,
people are buying computers, they're going to buy phones. If people are
yeah,
buying X, they're going to buy Z. Yeah.
yeah. So you're making me think of something else here. Is I hear entrepreneurs say this as far as the reason why people should buy things. They say it's really cool, right? So their technology is really cool, or their widget is really cool. how can we help someone who is in love with what they're promoting and selling or owning to go beyond it's really cool?
So look, in a consumer space, you can probably get away with really cool, especially if you have slick packaging and the marketing budget to go around it, right? And you can sell on the cool factor. In the business to business world, cool doesn't cut it anymore.
Yeah.
Um, nobody cares, right?
Yeah.
iPhones killed Blackberries not because they were cool, but because they were easier to use,
Yeah.
right? And by the way, I still think BlackBerry was a better email client solution, but it got out evolved.
Yeah.
Um, and so I think if you're selling on the cool factor, that lasts a pretty short cycle. I'm an economic seller personally. So I look at the cost and the feature benefits of what I'm selling, whether I'm moving things across the border or whether I'm selling something else or whether I'm helping somebody build their sales organization. And it goes back to a little bit of what I said earlier. Are you a cost or are you a profit center in what you're selling? Right? Am I securing in my world, are you securing somebody's information to keep the bad guys out? Right? Or are you, frankly, managing that for somebody else? Right?
Hmm.
Or maybe you're even the bad guy, though. They're out there. Um,
Yeah.
but the cool factor, everybody else is going to come up. They're gonna mirror you quickly. So you better stand on more that it's cool and I'm the only one with it.
Right. So how do you help people understand that?
It's a hard conversation. It's like telling
Yeah.
somebody their kid's ugly, right? It's your baby. It's your baby's ugly
Yeah.
conversation, and I've had a lot of them. Yeah,
Hmm.
this is really slick. What are they going to do with it, and
Yeah.
why do they care,
Hmm.
right?
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
starting to have that conversation internally on the messaging too,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, we're cool. How many Wall Street darlings are now out of business?
Hmm. Few.
Yeah,
The
right.
dot coms, maybe a few of those too over the years.
We can even step away and pick on the
Yeah.
fashion industry in the pandemic, right? You saw marquee names in fashion and retailing got crushed. That they used to be the must-haves, big names. Others
Right.
came out of it stronger.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like this, helping again entrepreneurs. The thing that I try to help people to speak about is not what you're selling, because nobody is buying what you're selling just because they want that, right?
Yeah.
So, for instance, we're not going out spending a ton of money in our home because we like fancy water heaters. We
Yeah.
like hot water, right? We're not buying giant TVs or flat screens because we want a flat screen sticking in our living room. No, we want to watch a particular, football game, Super Bowl, you name it, right? It's something that we want out of that. So, what's the thought about as far as entrepreneurs are concerned? Is this something that they frequently miss, or, is there, just how do we shine a light on that if that's at all possible?
So I think there is a class of entrepreneur that misses it all the time, and some are successful despite that. But I think most entrepreneurs become
And for those who are not watching this, we have a very happy dog, a pit bull wagging its tail incredibly fast here. So obviously he's found a cat or something.
Oh, he's trying to get his sister to play, is what he's trying to
Okay.
do. So you'll probably see two giant dogs go flying by any second now. Uh,
Great.
so
Yeah.
right, but then you get the ones that are economically driven, right?
Hmm.
And I think that gets you past the cool factor a little bit.
Yeah. Good. So looking at your LinkedIn profile, Tim, you have some experience in global sales and, in your words, complex sales.
Yeah.
What makes sales complex for those who might be thinking that complex means just asking for an order? So, what is really complex sales?
So for me, complex sales are long sales cycles. So I'll give you an example. One of my biggest deals ever, and my global experience, I carried a $750 million a year number. I carried a big number.
Okay.
Okay. One of my biggest deals ever was a refresh for a retailer we'd all know. It involved two or three manufacturers. It involved the telecom company that everybody in America would know the name of.
Wow.
And 2,400 locations over 18 months.
Mm-hmm.
That's the complex sale. We had to move into dozens and dozens of countries. We had to standardize the install pieces, and how something is installed in Germany versus how it's done in Spain versus how it's done in the UK in the US. Or the outcome is still the same, but the coordination to get it there and move the products around. So to me, that's my experience in complex sales. Multiple decision makers, both on the supply side as well as the end user customer side, and the complexity of just the transaction itself. There was tax implications, there was tariff implications, essentially the sales tax or what was VAT. If we did it from here, it was recoverable. If we did it from there, it wasn't. It was an 18% price swing, all of those things. So for me, that's complex sales.
Yeah, and that is indeed complex. So what I'm going to take out of that is multiple decision makers.
Yeah.
So I think most entrepreneurs can relate to that. So how can we use that from what you experienced to passing that along with a teaching moment?
So no matter how big it is, no matter how complicated it is, there is always one yes or no, right? That's the person in the fundamentals of everything that I run my businesses on is really the concept of an approver, a decision maker, an influencer, and a coach. It's not hard. It's actually really simple. You have to make sure you understand where people really sit. So the board might be influencers. The CEO might be a decision maker, but the approver might be the CFO, by the way, right?
Yeah.
Or the approver might be a business director, not a senior vice president. And understanding where each of those people fit in that process, if they're involved.
Yeah.
And, one thing I was taught by one of my uncles was, back in the day when everyone had a receptionist and had an assistant in the office, if you owned a business, right, and you're calling on a small business, everybody had it. It was kind of a status thing, but it also served a lot of operational functions that we've now put off to technology and elsewhere, and we've outsourced. The advice I was given was always be nicer to the receptionist and the assistant than you are to the person you're calling in.
I love it. So how did that help? I love it because I used to say and do the same thing. So what was the experience based on that?
It's for me, it was really simple. You treat everybody the same.
Yeah.
Right. So I treated everybody exactly the same with the same courtesy and the same respect, whether they signed the check or not. Ultimately, you have to ask the right person for the order, the person that can say yes if we go kind of old school on it. But if the person that they rely on day to day is going, Tim was kind of a jerk,
right?
He was rude when he called, or he's been a little pushy. Could cost you sale, could cost you a long-term relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. Those people who are not necessarily part of the sale will not sign. They will not be able to sign, but boy, they can make you smell pretty bad quickly.
Yes, they can.
And I was thinking of, years ago when I was making sales calls, there was a feeling that gatekeepers were somewhat less than human for whatever reason, right? So that would be like an executive assistant, a receptionist. You would call, and all the advice in the world in books anyway was, you just state the name of the person you're calling. I couldn't do that, right? It wasn't natural for me to say, Mr. Kubiak, please. Well, who are you? Right? So I'd say, hey, this is Harry Spate calling, and I'm looking for Mr. Kubiak. And then if he wasn't available, I'm talking to that person.
Yeah.
Right? I'm trying to get their name. I'm trying to find out about them, how long they've been with the company. And then lo and behold, they would give me information frequently as to when the person would take the call, if it was phone call or email, or telegraph back in the day for me. But, you get the idea. It was like developing these relationships and good things happen. But when we don't treat people like people, why would they help us?
Yeah.
It's common sense where I come from.
Yeah.
And then isn't it true in these complex situations that doesn't it make sense that to get all the help that you can get? Sort of like being a politician at times, isn't it?
It is. It is, right? And it's understanding, to use modern social media terms, it's understanding the influencer, right?
Yeah. Right.
right? Because
Yeah.
if you look at brands fail now based on one bad experience, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, yeah, you hit the nail on the head. It's like that bad review, someone posting a video of something that, failed miserably. But
Yep.
I think of entrepreneurs and they want to get to the decision maker, right? So they know the decision maker. They can relate to the decision maker. The decision maker may be an entrepreneur, but they frequently don't have any time or patience for people who are part of the process, right? And I say part of the process doesn't have to be complex. It could be when you're walking in the building,
Yeah.
right? And the way you ask, the way you interact with people, if you're rude, you're not smiling, you've got things on your mind, and you're just cutting to the chase, and the receptionist is one who's very friendly, and her part-time role in the company may be an executive assistant,
Mhm.
or right. I mean, I've met CFOs who have manned the phones before, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, people do what they need to do to help a company. When someone's out sick and you're rude to that person, it's like, see ya.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. In especially in small companies.
That's good stuff. All right, we're gonna edit out the drool. All right, so as far as what you're doing today, with working all of these, gigantic corporations, startups, venture capitalists, what's your advice for the small business that just wants to succeed? For the
Focus on the
small business owner? Yeah,
focus on the customer. Focus on the
yeah.
customer. Listen to the customer objectively. Weigh what they're asking for with what you're able to deliver, and go back and have that conversation. At the end of the day, it's that.
I love it. It is so simple. It's such great advice. Focus on the customer. That's something we all can do.
Yeah.
So, Tim, it is outstanding having this conversation with you. I mean, I've been thoroughly entertained by the dogs, and
I'm
I
glad.
feel so. Yes, there have been dogs running around in the background playing with each other, which is great because I'm a dog lover, and you bring immense value to us as well as your clients, I'm sure. So, really appreciate you coming on the show today.
I appreciate you having me. Thanks, Harry.
All right, great stuff. So we will do more down the road. So have a great day, Tim. Much success to you, and keep on selling with dignity. You definitely have the mindset.
Thank you.
Man, sales is tough. I'm just not cut out to be a salesperson. Have you ever felt that way? Selling doesn't need to be so difficult. My name is Harry Spate. I'm here to serve and to help you succeed. Join me as we discuss sales made easy.